player Will.
Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here. Today, this is the Gernsback character review. Very exciting to get into this character. We have not had one like this in a little bit here, but for now, we're going to go through the character overview, base and total stat analysis, with a couple other stats leading up to the report card, where we'll look at those stats in the context of his kit. We'll look a little bit more of him from a bigger point of view in the general thoughts, and then go deeper with the passives, the counters, the job abilities, and auto priority, the TMR review, job-based division card eligibility, Esper Synergies, and then weapon optimization. So, kicking things off here, Gernsback, the brand new water unit added to the game. They've given him High Dragoon as the unique main job on this 70 cost unit. They've given him Sniper and Nightblade as the sub-jobs. He does equip spears with armors, helms, and accessories, so more of a heavier equipment character. Move of 3, jump of 4 as more of that stereotypical Dragoon unit with a cost of 70 as previously mentioned. The faith stat, I'm going with 50 faith here. There's no upside to really having it higher than that. From a job perspective, his max range is 4 squares away, 1 AoE on the main job, and 3 single target attacks on the main job. And from a resistance standpoint, 20% to magic, nice strength there, 10% to strike, a little bit lower at 5% to slash, minus 5% to missile, and 0 to pierce, though, where most units nowadays tend to have like minus 5, minus 10, minus 15% to pierce. He's not one of those units. And ailment resistance is 50% to poison, 50% to berserk, and 10% to frog. The berserk and poison are really strong ones to have against for the current meta and foreseeable future. From the mastery ability here, though, they've only really given him 15 pierce attack as the unique extra ability here. That's an F, in my opinion, for what they've given him. That is a non-factor in anything here, and I actually hold that against him. It's a pretty big power creep drop back from what most characters get on their mastery ability. The dream ability, though, 20 reaction block rate, 30% acquired AP. And that's pretty decent. We'll see how it ends up working out, but I don't think it's terribly impactful to his overall production, if you will. When we look at the base stats overall, and again, just summarizing these 3 charts, the top left one here, I have these characters grouped in segments of the stats and little buckets to get an idea of where they fall relative to other groupings of characters. The bottom left chart is just all of those HP stats, this line chart basically dot plotted to see where he falls relative. And the box and whisker chart, the long and short of how to read this big blue box is between the 25th and 75th percentile, so it makes up 50% of all units. On the very lower one here, this is the bottom range, and the top line here is the max range. These dots that you're seeing are outlier characters that would normally skew the data, so you remove them. So characters like Engelbert are in here, and that they completely skew the data for everyone else. Went over that. Gernsback overall is basically average for base HP. He's right here basically in the middle where most characters are. Neither really a strength nor weakness. I think it's fine that they put him here for a base HP perspective. From a base attack perspective, not the highest in the game, a little bit of a step back from what we see in the top tier. They've given him a 397 base attack, which is really only 3 attack points off of this higher bucket here. So practically speaking, it's still a very healthy base attack. I'm not terribly worried about that overall. Look at the base agility. He's roughly in the middle here with many of these units. We've seen base agility is only one small part of the story for the total agility and the net effective thing. So I'm not worried about this either. It's a decent starting spot. The base dexterity, yeah, basically in this middle aggregation of units, just a step above. Could be a little bit better, but honestly could be worse. Not necessarily a crit hit monster by any stretch of the imagination, but overall average dexterity and then average luck here as well, where he's in that 50 to 75th quartile. He's basically lumped in with a bunch of units. And so when we look at the base stats compared to all other UR units, again, pretty safe, relatively average for most. He's a 70 cost unit, so kind of expect that in your gut, if you know what I mean, that anything more than that is certainly a nice surprise. When we add in the board stats, the mastery ability, there's a couple changes here, but I don't think anything terribly substantial other than the fact that he takes a small step back on the dexterity and luck. Same thing with the HP, which, yeah, you're starting to see some chips in the armor now, if you will, in terms of some of the stat deficiencies. And from a board perspective, nothing really stands out here for what they decided to tailor for him. Could be better, could be worse. Now, for the agility, he does start off, basically average in terms of agility with no passives. He does have a passive boosting ability, though, which does get him into that next tier. And you can obviously see that these are with vision cards equipped, both main slot and sub slot, that with that passive ability, he's on a higher tier of what most characters can achieve. So overall, pretty happy for what he can get for agility in total. The crit hit and crit avoid, again, nothing terribly special from the dexterity perspective. Really not a ton on the crit hit node. So he's basically average for crit hit rate. Crit avoidance is pretty bad, though. He's definitely a fair amount of percentage points below many other characters. Not having a high base luck means that you're probably not going to get much better than this. So overall, below average on the crit avoidance rate, which means he will likely take more damage from those high dexterity characters, obviously. We look at the accuracy, not an inherently accurate unit, but he does have a 25% accuracy passive that, yeah, that does bump him up significantly should you have that equipped. That being said, I don't think his niche is to ever go toe-to-toe with evade units. I would not recommend it. So even though he has access to that passive, I don't really think it's anything to lean into personally. In the evasion perspective, though, he's not there at all, not even remotely close either, so not an evade unit. As we transition to the report card here, overall effective HP, I'm going with a C here. No defense, no spirit innately. He's got 12 unit res on a passive, though he's got no AoE or unit res inside the kit innately. Other than that, so 12 is certainly nice. You will have that on almost all the time. But honestly, a little bit squishier than what I would have liked to have seen from a character of his build in terms of what he has to offer for survivability, which is fair. I'm going B plus here, but I think I'm being generous, quite honestly. He does have protect access and 20 defense on another buff. His spear will give him another 15 unit res when the HP is above 70%, but that will be gone after one hit. So overall unit res will start high, but not end high. And he will be jumping in the air some of the time here too, where he is that typical Dragoon of actually like jumping. So that is a part of the survivability that should you remove yourself from the battlefield, you obviously can't get hit while that's happening. So I've considered that in the survivability. He's got a preemptive ability hit too, that he might be able to kill an enemy before they hit you. But I think I'm being very generous here in the survivability. I'm actually worried about his overall effectiveness given how bulky most other damage dealers are nowadays. Now the damage, I'm going with a B plus here. Exceptional Imperil access, but he's limited to 50 defense pen. It's really not all that great. The Pierce type damage, yes, lots of characters have weaknesses to it. That's certainly nice, but lots of characters also have strengths, and there's no Pierce penetration really in the game, certainly not in his kit. So when you talk about characters gearing for Pierce res, that B plus could easily be a D for going against someone that's got a ton of Pierce res, which certainly possibly he's not built to scale in terms of percentages for defense pen and Pierce res pen as the game goes on. But agility wise, I'm going with a C here. 77 innately versus the average, 83 versus 81, so slightly above average, but you won't always have that passive equip. But if you do, yeah, maybe go to C plus here, maybe a little bit higher. The accuracy, I'm going with a C plus here. Average accuracy, he does have 25 accuracy on a passive that you can equip. No guaranteed hit, though, certainly hurts. So overall accuracy, not one of his strong points in the least. The evasion going with a D, now no evade potential whatsoever. The movement is a B, though. The jump 4 innately certainly is nice. He does have a move +1 buff on a sub-job. So overall, movement I think is in a good spot. I tend to prefer more of a move +1 than a jump +1. So having that innate 4 jump is actually really nice, but I think more maps tend to prefer movement just because there's a little more that happens in terms of like spacing from teammates and how far you can walk to buff and things of that nature. So again, even the movement I might be overrating just a little bit here. The auto ease of use, I'm going with an A-, though. The AI is very straightforward. Pierce damage is very easy to really calculate and get good usage out of overall, so I'm not concerned about people having trouble using him. The game disruption, though, I'm going with D. Again, per usual, 70 cost is very tough to justify, but he's a great water unit overall. But I think his biggest strength is in mono Pierce teams. Not mono water, but mono Pierce teams. And so if you're not building those units or vision cards up, he's obviously going to have a little bit of a tougher time getting his max value. We'll get more into that soon. The passives, going with a B here. Overall, well-rounded passives. I just think some are very much wasted, though, that you can't use them. The counter ability is going with a B- here. The preemptive counter is nice, but it's very short range. That's why I didn't put it as a bullet point here in survivability. Great to have. How often does it work? Left to be determined. The overall job and kit, though, I'm going with a B. Excellent Pierce kit. Some small things I don't like, though, that we'll see that as we go through the job, for an overall rating of a C+. Now, very solid Pierce unit. He's definitely missing some key things, though, to be great, or what I consider to be usable in a wider array of PvP content. But to the general thoughts, I can talk about that more. Great in perils. He's got a 30% unit res in peril on his limit break. His biggest thing in his kit that is his saving grace, in my opinion, is that he's got a teammate buff that will add minus 15% Pierce res on his and his allies' buffs. If he did not have this ability, this character would be garbage tier. This is the biggest upside he has to offer, in my opinion. He's got an AoE ability that will do a minus 20 AoE res, but just for that cast, just for himself. So other teammates will not take advantage of it. But really that 15% Pierce in peril is why I think that mono Pierce team is something that he will thrive in. We'll talk more about that soon. The limiting defense pen is a concern for the future where, you know, you need Ultros, the Esper, in the future coming that will give him another 20. It was really made for him. So sure, Gernsback with the Ultros Esper, putting him at 70, that's fine. If you don't have Ultros, you're kind of out of luck. The Sniper sub does have a buff that has 40 more, but a little bit of a tougher call there. Which buff do you sub out to make that happen? So it's there, but hard to make work. Slightly more short range than I would have liked, to be honest. There's a lot of ranged units in this game. Some characters, the short range is fine because you want them to either group up with the team a little bit more, so you want them to, you know, lag behind. Some of them you want to ensure an extra buff or two, so you don't want them to engage as quickly. But he seems really kind of tailor-made to help counter Soul and Elia, who do have way better range than he does and way more attack flexibility. So I'm a little bit concerned on that point, but regardless, he is lacking some stereotypically good things here. He's got no courage or courage removal. He's got no re-raise or re-raise removal. He's got no barrier break on demand. It's only on his limit break, so only one-time use. And he's got no protect removal. So you're talking about all the typical things that people mitigate damage with, and he's really got access to none of them. His only upside is the fact that most people don't have any Pierce res. That can easily be hedged. So sure, it looks good, like maybe right now no one's gearing for Pierce. End of the day though, someone stacks a bunch of Pierce res, someone stacks a bunch of defense, he is going to struggle mightily. But he is an exceptional Pierce enabler. Even if he can't do the job, that 15% Pierce Imperil on the AoE buff is immense. We talk about adding that to Dialdo, to Jaden Celebrated, to Flagbearer Glaciella, who many are reincarnating at this moment. That's a great buff to give to them to amplify their damage. So even if he's not doing it, they can do it. Net effect ends up being okay. He does have access to Dispel. Certainly nice, but it's post-damage. Again, Dispel's great. A lot of value. It's unfortunate they made it post-damage, though. Could have been a lot better if it was pre-damage. He does seemingly have some good current meta strength. So he's got a lot of unit res, a lot of strike res, a lot of magic res. Water element is certainly a nice thing for Soul and the fire mages that we're seeing with him, like Shals and Kefka and Rain. That Pierce attack type also is great timing where no one's really gearing for it, and all the strongest characters have minus Pierce res on them. Overall, good timing for him to come out. And he's a superb 70 cost water unit that they desperately needed. From a mono element perspective, they are one of the worst elements in the game when it comes to lower cost units. Him being 70 cost is a generous addition to that team where all of their best units are 100 cost, and you obviously can't field all of them for cost limited content. But we'll go to the passive abilities. Now, High Dragoon Fervor is a must-have. That's that attack 24%, 40 defense pen, 12 unit res. Love this. After this, really debatable. Do you go for the agility of 12% and the extra strike res? Right now, I say yes. In the future, maybe go for Nightblade Mastery. That's another 30% attack and 25 accuracy. I like that too, but I don't think you're really using anything out of these three. And when you get to counter abilities, nothing here that I really love. Preemptive Piercer is fine, and it's that preemptive attack, but only 2 squares away, and either straight to in front of you, behind you, or straight to your left and right. So very limiting for range and overall area spread. And we look at the main job buffs here next. Now, Dragon Scale is second priority buff. You will use the teammate buff first, and this is the one that is a 50% barrier to himself. This is that minus 15 Pierce res and peril for teammates upon their hits. It's 20 AP and 25 unit res for himself. And then after that, the self buff will be attack 40%, defense 20, and protect for himself. So these two in conjunction are two really good buffs overall. I mean, even if you dispel one, you still have protect. Even if you dispel protect, you still got unit res. There's a lot of things here that overlap very well. And for the main job offensive abilities here, a couple things to note. Number one, he does have 2 abilities that have cast time on them, where he jumps in the air and he's got no cast time down in the kit. So we'll talk a little bit about how long that takes. But he's at max 4 squares away. He can hit a relatively high on a range height here on Dragonlance Drive, but as we go through them, Drain Jump is an absorb HP, 141% damage ability. This one, I think he absorbs 100% of the damage he does, which is actually really nice. This is an exceptional late fight ability from that perspective, that it's only 13 AP, and if you can do damage to an enemy and absorb 100% of the damage, certainly very nice, but cast time 360. The Dispel Spear is the one that's that decrease AoE res of 20 on this AoE ability for just that cast for himself, and it's the Dispel, but it's post damage. The Dragonlance Dive is that 4 square range. It's tied for the longest range in his kit. That's that 30% Pierce and Peril for that target. Also very, very good for amplifying damage. And finally, Dragonhorn Transfixion, but this one's a direct line of sight that you must see the enemy directly in front of you. It's an extra 30% hit chance, but again, even that extra percent hit chance, I don't think it's going to make or break him versus evade units overall, given where he starts off at, but it's a decreased healing power of 50, so there's some really good utility there from what we're seeing currently. So overall, again, this main job is like relatively very salvageable. I don't think there's anything bad with this by any means. I'm a little nervous sometimes about the cast time, but really just got to see that in practice. When we talk about those cast times, you're really only going to get it from a Trust Stone passive of minus 200. And when you have that equipped, Drain Jump will not change at all. That'll still be 3 ticks, but Dragonlance Dive will go from 4 ticks to 3 ticks. So you will get a little improvement there. But unlike Oberyn, OG Oberyn, that has that Tracer passive that allows you to follow someone while you're in the air, he does not. So maybe a little limited in how he ends up using it in terms of how he picks his target priority. I haven't used a real Dragoon in a while in auto PvP, so I really don't have a strong opinion, but I'm more nervous than I am hopeful. But theoretically, if you went with the Siren Esper, which I could see, that's an extra 400 cast time down. You do move that Drain Jump down to a 2nd tick. So we'll see. It's kind of recommended, not highly recommended, but certainly an option. Look at the limit break here. That's that physical barrier break, the 30 unit resin peril. Only 3 squares away, though. Again, I think this is a fine limit break. I think it's obviously very, very strong for what it does for the Imperil. It certainly stacks really nicely with the fact that it's got a 30% Pierce Imperil on the main job, and teammates might be using the 15% Pierce Imperil ahead of time. So there's some real great damage amplification that can be done here. Now for the sub-job, the High Dragoon, this is not a bad first ability here that's shorter AoE, but again, only 2 squares away. It's a 25% chance to inflict stun, but I don't like him as a high faith unit, so I'm not confident in that stun percentage. The Swift Drake Banner is a nice secondary access, though, to a move +1 with extra agility here if you wanted to sub out some of your buffs in the main job. I actually do like this one, but I don't have a clear favorite. Sniper here, you know, I wouldn't use any of the missile attacks. I would really only use the target buff if I was leaning into this. And the Nightblade sub, kind of the same idea here. Maiming Slash certainly is nice from a utility perspective for the reduced counter chance, but that decreased healing power he technically already has on the main job, so a little bit of overlap there. Double resist we've not seen used really prevalently ever. It's not a strong buff overall. So sub-job selection, again, I don't want to call it a weakness of his, but I don't love any of them either. Now for the TMR review, the Dragonbone Helm, it's an actual helm. The stats on it are fine, I guess. 10 defense, nothing crazy. 395 HP, nothing crazy. The TMR skill, kind of whatever. Decreased CP consumption to 25 for 3 turns. It's kind of whatever. I don't think this is a very strong buff overall. And the Blind, Sleep, and Confusion, we've seen a couple of these already in terms of nullification. It's fine. A little more niche, obviously, to certain status effects that you're seeing, but I don't think these 3 are 3 of the more recent ones that we're looking out for. The fact that it's on a helm, I think, is minus points too. I don't think his TMR is any good. Now for the job-based vision cards, he is obviously a spear-wielding unit, and there's actually a lot of really great vision cards here. Pierce, as a job, is actually one of the best classes together. They have some of the best vision cards you could ever ask for what they want to do well. You have 2 different unit resistance cards. The Full Metal Alchemist card itself is, again, one of the top 3 best vision cards ever put into the game. This alone drives a ton of the upside for Pierce. They also have 2 future vision cards that give more Pierce attack to increase those modifiers. They have some really good options for resistances here where you go missile res or strike res, magic res. There's some acquired AP ones. Overall, Pierce is in a really good spot. This is one of the best things about putting him into those mono Pierce teams that I was alluding to earlier, that I really like the upside of that. Now for the Esper Synergies, in terms of, you know, nodes to focus, I would go offensive here. I'd go Water, Pierce, Human Killer, Attack percent. The rest, per usual, matchup specific. Yeah, sure, go with some accuracy, but I really wouldn't even attempt to. If you're looking for accuracy for an evade meta, there's far better water units to bring that. Perrine, Astrius, Miranda, Varys, Summer Glass Yellow with what her aura has to boost accuracy. Like, there's so many other options. I wouldn't worry about it. But, you know, right off the bat, Odin, Dark Odin, and Bahamut are still the de facto best generic damage dealing espers. From a water perspective, I actually still like Dark Siren because there are water attack nodes on there. You also have some of the reaction block and the debuff weakening effect, which I like. Leviathan is still an interesting one here for the water attack, pierce attack, some of the other nodes. And Siren, actually not the worst one either, where you do have water attack. You have cast time reduction, as we talked about earlier. You have pierce attack on there, slash res if you really wanted it. So although you're kind of, you know, killing yourself versus that lightning matchup, this is still an overall relatively decent Esper for him. And in the future, very, very important, Ultros and the Sahagin Prince are the 2 best in slot Espers for him, in my opinion. Yes, even more than any of these two espers in the bottom right are the ones you're really going to be using for him, where they offer physical damage amplification. They have extra defense pen, extra water attack nodes, obviously. There's a lot more things that they made with these espers with characters like him in mind that he's going to get way better than what's currently offered in Global. And now finally for the weapon optimization. I wouldn't look much further than his own. I think this is the best one here, where you get that crit damage of 15. Again, not a huge crit monster though, so I'm not thinking a lot about that, but there are some crit rate boosting vision cards that could certainly help. The reaction block rate of 30 is great. That puts him up to 50% total. The unit res of 15 when your HP is above 70 though, I really like for that extra bit of survivability in the current meta where unit res is very important. Pierce attack 15. The stats are well rounded. The thing with these spears are obviously you can go wind spear. It's got some agility on it. That's still a very good recommendation, which I do still recommend it. The Dragon Whisper that came out as part of the Reliquiary's quest does have 20 accuracy on it. When your HP is lower, it's got that AoE down in terms of all your attacks, but I don't love him as a unit that dabbles in low HP, so Dragon Whisker is not my favorite. I will give a special mention here, though. I should have added in the Platinum Lance, though, where you still get initial AP of 20. That's one of the best things about the spear. You still get that crit damage, which overlaps with his, and the Pierce attack 15. The stats, a little bit stronger here at 184 attack overall. You just lose that unit res, obviously, and that reaction block doesn't apply to him as far as I can tell, but you can get that on a Trust Stone passive. But that's the Gernsback review in a nutshell. I think I'm selling him a little short for how good he is for maybe just an average Pierce user. For Pierce teams, he is exceptional. For the current meta, he doesn't put a big dent into it. For mono water and cost restricted stuff, he's an excellent addition. So you get some good pros and cons. It's really just weighing against what we talk about now, like the future of the game where we only have a 1 month roadmap. And when I see this many things early on where I'm a little bit nervous about the longevity in the game, I got to be a little more conservative in my opinion overall. But that's my thoughts for now. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll talk to you all soon.